Welcome to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, where owners of privately held middle market companies talk about founding, scaling, and exiting their businesses successfully. Learn how to maximize and monetize your business on your own terms. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Susan Carney, the host for the Growth Plus Exit podcast, where middle market owners and CEOs of businesses talk about founding, scaling, and sometimes selling their companies. The episode today is brought to you by Newport LLC. We're a team of seasoned business owners and C-suite executives who help private company owners and CEOs build more valuable businesses and exit them on their own terms. You can learn more about us at newportllc.com. Today, I'm talking with Danguole Altman. Danguole is a serial entrepreneur and innovator in precision diagnostics, neurodegenerative diseases, pain management, and women's health. She has started and led two companies, FemPartners and Vapogenix, and is now leading CX Precision Medicine. You've got quite a background there. Welcome, Danguole. So pleased to have you here today.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to see you, and I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah. Let's roll back to the beginning of your life as an entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit about your first business. Where did the idea come from? What business was it? And what convinced you to take the leap to become an entrepreneur instead of staying in a W-2 type corporate job?
Yeah. So, my whole career has really focused on healthcare. And in healthcare, I was coming out of business school. I was at McKinsey, so I had the opportunity to work across a lot of the different parts of healthcare. And when I left McKinsey, I became head of managed care contracting at Kelsey-Seybold Clinic, which is a big multi-specialty clinic in Houston. I then did a short stint at HCA and became CEO of a physician practice management company. And that really sort of set the ground for really that first company that I co-founded together with the physicians, which is FemPartners. And that was a physician practice management company back in the day when a lot of other companies were out there and were really consolidating different types of physician practices. And that was sort of in the early 2000s. And really, the reason that I jumped into it was that I really thought we could do it better. I saw a lot of other companies that were maybe not so focused on the economics of the industry, and they were just trying to piecemeal, kind of aggregate physicians, and a group in Massachusetts and a group in California. Well, there's a lot less synergy you can get than really focused in regionally and really focused on where can you really add value, where can you work with the physicians. So I think that what caused me to take the leap is that I saw other people doing it. And I thought, in being CEO of the practice I was at, I saw things we were doing that other people were trying to learn from that we could really expand. And I've also, as someone who is a business person, every one of the companies I've led, I've really done that in partnership with clinicians, because physicians, I think, really are the ones that are on the front lines and see the problems of this very complex, regulated, crazy system that has payers, that has patients, that has hospital systems, that has lots of different players. But I think for me, I always believe that the clinician being the closest to the patient was really who really understood best the problems of the system. So for FemPartners, we really started with a strong physician practice that understood kind of the healthcare industry from that. The second company that I co-founded, Vapogenix, was in a very different space. We licensed technology from MD Anderson. And that was together with the head of the pain medicine department at MD Anderson that saw issues with the sort of the unmet needs in that particular space. And even with CX Precision Medicine now, that's been done very jointly with Dr. Sid O'Brien and his team at the University of North Texas Health Science Center who came at Alzheimer's from a clinician perspective of where is that gap in information that's causing primary care physicians not to know how to take care of patients with that disease. So I've always seen my role as a founder and the roles I've been in as partnering with the science and the clinical side on really understanding what the needs are and then growing that and taking advantage of the opportunity.
You know, it's funny, Danguole, one of my first professional jobs was at a hospital center, a large research hospital center. And my observation was that the business folks and the clinicians didn't always see things the same way. And some of the administrative staff were able to really bring their best out in the clinicians. And some, it just seemed like it was a battle from day one. So what was your secret to working so closely and productively, or what is your secret for working so closely and productively with those clinicians? Is it the respect that you have for them, or is there kind of, how do you make it work so well?
I think it's two things. I think it's one is picking the right person, because as in any kind of, business, people will have a range, but so do physicians and clinicians. And I can think of ones both in my career that I probably would choose not to partner with. And maybe it does come down to that mutual understanding and respect. So I think it's picking your partner where your visions of where it's going are really aligned in what needs to happen. And I can say for all three of the companies I've led, I really had that. I had a physician, clinician, partner or partners that we both saw the solution and respected each other's abilities to create that and bring that forward. And sometimes that doesn't happen, and sometimes it can be that failure can come from both sides. It can come both from business people that are like, it's about the money, it's about this, and it can come from a clinician standpoint, because there are many clinicians, I think, and physicians that sort of kind of distrust business or the financial aspects of it. So I think that it's finding the right people where you can really align on a vision, and don't go forward unless that's really solid, I think, because there's always any kind of business. It's always a roller coaster ride. There's always the things that you don't know are going to happen. And I think having transparency, shared vision, and shared values are really the critical things.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'm wondering, you were a CEO of your first enterprise. You're now on the third time, right? This isn't your first rodeo. What do you think you learned earlier in your career that has helped you in this with CX Precision?
Surround yourself with really smart people that you trust and have a lot of experience and can complement my own skills and abilities. And I think that there are sometimes people go into it with an ego of, I know everything and I can do everything. But I think being able to work with people and have people that can then develop other people underneath them and can select those people that are maybe more junior, haven't had the experience, but can really work on advancing them. So I think that building the right team and appreciating the different skills that different people can build to that team, and then having a strong value system of just respect and openness, but also being able to have open disagreement, because I think that sometimes that doesn't happen either if people are feeling hesitant, if they're not so sure about something. And I remember I go back to my McKinsey days, way back when, early in my career, and McKinsey's a very values-based consulting firm. And I don't know if they still do this because it's been years since I've been there, but they really kind of instill these values in you. And one of the values that I always remember that that you were taught even as a very young consultant was the obligation to dissent. And what that meant is that if you are a young consultant sitting in a room and you really think the team is missing something, and even if it's the most senior partner that's missing, you have the obligation to say something. Now, that does not mean that you have the obligation to throw grenades on it or not listen to the answer, or you don't bring that up in front of the client, if you haven't vetted it out first with the team, but you do have that obligation to bring it up. So I think of that in terms of my own management teams and building those, because you do want people who get along, who work well, who bring their expertise, but also don't mind challenging something one of their team members says, as long as it's in a respectful way and in a fact-based way.
Yeah, sometimes people hire folks that are just like them, and then you get along great, but you never
Right.
the different sides of the story, the different perspectives can bring. So I love you carrying that value, which opens and welcomes people to get along and have fun, but also to bring different perspectives to the thing.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, it's aspirational, right? So it doesn't always happen, but at least you can try to do it. So,
yeah, that's right. So where in its evolution is CX Precision today?
So I'm really excited about CX Precision. So we are right on the brink of commercialization. So it's a really kind of from financial terms, kind of late seed, early Series A sort of financing perspective. So Dr. Sid O'Brien is who is the founder, really the co-founder, and it's on whose research this is based, is the most funded scientist in blood-based biomarkers and Alzheimer's in the United States. He's had $250 million of funding to build an incredible database and all the supporting studies that have led to the point where we are. And there's been a lot going on in blood-based biomarkers, but I think what differentiates CX is that Sid, coming at this as a clinician, as somebody who had seen patients, he doesn't see patients anymore, but had a lot in his past, looked at it and said, so many patients have trouble. They go to their primary care physicians with concerns about dementia, or possibly their family members have concerns that they're having some memory issues. And right now, that primary care physician, more than half of them don't do any kind of cognitive testing at that primary care level. So they tend to either, okay, we're going to move that patient on up to a specialist, which it's really hard to get an appointment for, or they say, well, let's wait and see. And if the dementia gets bad enough, then we know what it is. But that problem is that now there's some new treatments. There's both drugs, there's non-drug solutions. They work much, much better if you can catch it early. So the wait and see is not a really good answer. And our healthcare system has a big bottleneck up at the specialist level to do all of those full tests. So a blood-based test that's at the primary care level that can sort people into a category of, okay, you have something going on, but it's not dementia. Gives people, it's not Alzheimer's dementia. It gives patients a lot of peace of mind, and it allows that primary care doctor to say, what else is going on? Are they having sleep issues? Are they having vision issues? They having hearing issues? Any of these other things that in early stages have very similar symptoms, or if they're not ruled out, that's the patient you go to the specialty level. So where we're at is we've licensed the technology from the university. We are having the necessary validations completed in the right level of laboratory that would then allow us to go ahead and to offer that initially on a self-pay basis to patients. And so we're going to do that in sort of pilot form this year while we're building the case. And we've done a fair amount already on building the case with payers and reimbursements and getting the right codes and Medicare and everything else. So, that's what I'm doing. So I've got a small team who are working with a number of people. The company's based in Fort Worth, Texas, and it's been a lot of fun. So I've really enjoyed it. It's important work, and it's been fun.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's going to be very impactful. I know from my own experience with my husband's health that if your solution had been on the market 4 or 5 years ago, it would have been a huge game changer for us because we were right in
Yeah.
a cycle where his primary care physician didn't really know what to do with him. So we,
No, it's a big issue. The thing is, there's a lot of their competitors that are in the space with specific tests that are being marketed that are amyloid type tests, which is fine. But those really belong in the specialty level because you can't use that as a screen at the primary care because a third of people who are cognitively normal, who are over 70, have amyloid tau pathology, and they will never have Alzheimer's. So the worst thing I think you could do is at the primary care level say, oh, you have this pathology, and now people are scared to death, and they may never have cognitive issues. And then the digital cognitive tests try to address that by saying, okay, we'll do this easy test at the primary care level. But primary care, you're really busy and you cannot take extra time in the exam room. And patients who are older, they're not used to technology. You can't just hand them an iPad and say, okay, we're going to go run and do some other things and you complete this. So all of those tests can be terrific, but they need to be a level up. You need some easy way to just sort of say, okay, we can rule out dementia. Let's focus on other things. Let's rule out Alzheimer's and let's look at some of those other things. So I think that we've had a lot of good feedback on the market need for our test. In fact, we've been doing a physician survey. It's not complete yet, but we have a fair number of responses. And I don't think I've ever seen anything that, as we described our test and the need for it, we had 78% of primary care doctors say that a test like that would be extremely valuable. Like that, not just the in-between category of, yes, valuable, sort of valuable, but extremely valuable. And we only had one doctor that said, nah, not that valuable. So, that's very encouraging to me as a market signal.
Yeah, that's terrific. And so as you're transitioning into pilots and commercialization, what kind of challenges are you anticipating and what are you trying to do in advance to mitigate them?
Yeah. So, financing is definitely, it's probably the biggest challenge right now, not just for us, but in general for earlier stage companies. So there's a lot of, I think the only risk mitigation is just keep talking to people and keep meeting people and find people that are interested. And there is a lot of cash floating around. So I think it's overcoming investors' just general resistance to, worried about the markets and things like that. So financing is always a risk. But in our case, we've really focused on the biggest risks are sort of adoption risk, regulatory risk, reimbursement risk. Those are the things in our industry that people really focus on. So for each one of those, it's having a really strong partner. In our case, we use outside contracted consultants that really know their area and use those selectively to really understand what do you need to do. So we've done a lot of things earlier than I think many diagnostic companies do. We figured out what are the economics for our payers early, as opposed to saying, okay, now we've got this great test, it's validated. Well, no one wants to pay for it. So we took a lot of those types of things really early in our development and said, okay, let's find people who really know that and can figure out what we need to do. And so for each one of those risks, we've just tried to risk mitigate best we can.
Yeah, I think that to me, that illustrates the importance of clinicians partnering with business folks, right? The clinicians doing the tough work of finding the opportunity and testing it, and you doing the tough work of building an organization and finding talent and anticipating the more practical challenges of money and contracts and partnerships and all that stuff that actually commercial.
I mean, the big question is always in any of these is what value are you really bringing, right? And I think so often sometimes people start with what is a cool idea. And you see this a lot in life sciences, but I think it extends to other industries too, where people are working on an area and like, oh, this is so cool. I found that this does this with that. But you really have to bring it back to the we used to call it the so what test.
Yes.
Like, so what? Like, okay, this is really cool, but is that going to inform someone's decision? What value is that bringing? Is that going to really matter? And I think sometimes as business people, that can be our contribution to the discussion of the so what, because it's easy to get excited about the technology or the innovation or the science without getting to so what, and then also understanding how can this really be implemented? Does the solution sort of fit the operating constraints and environment? And a lot of times people, I think it's a complex industry. People don't, answer that. And I remember a drug a number of years ago, because we were in the pain space and it had been approved without calling out the company, but it got FDA approved. People had put a lot of money in it, but the solution required administration in a doctor's office because there was a big side effect that patients could burn and have a lot of downsides on it. And it never got adopted. And it's because from the physician's standpoint, do I really want to be administering this solution, tying up the exam room, having a nurse in the room the whole time, and having a risk that the patient's going to have these big side effects? Like, no, I'm going to go use something else that maybe doesn't work as well. And whether the company hadn't thought that through or whether they had thought it through and then the FDA required them to do it that way, I don't know the answer to that. But it's just an example of, you've got to sort of try to tie those pieces together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, identify the barriers to adoption and see if you can fix them to make them practical.
Yeah. Best you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about some of your proudest moments as a business owner and a founder.
I think that they're sort of twofold. So one comes back to the team, because you try and you build a team, and then you hope that you have that team build their teams underneath that so that you end up with an organization. But sometimes you don't see the impact, especially when it's not the people on your direct team, but it's people that are a couple of layers down, and, maybe I kind of know them and not really. And frankly, I think for me, some of the proudest things have happened, where a number of years later, you meet one of those people and they'll say, you changed my life. I mean, I hate to be that dramatic, but I've had that happen where somebody has said, you took, and this person didn't report to me, but I knew who they were because they reported to somebody that reported me. They said, you saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I didn't think, and this was a really hard time in my life. And I didn't know I could do that next step, but you trusted me and put me in that position, and it changed my life. I mean, I think it's hard to ever beat anything like that. And I've had, not many, but there have been a few times that's happened. So I think on a personal level, that's super rewarding. But I think that the other piece, since I've been very much in the innovation space my whole, as opposed to existing businesses that are there, it's all about how the solution that you thought could help solve a problem actually scales enough that it is solving the problem. So we're not quite there yet on CX precision medicine, but even having spent a bunch of time on making sure that our positioning is correct, that that this solution fits all this, of understanding the payer piece and the regular. So starting to get feedback from folks and finding that it fits those things can be really, really satisfying, whether that's an investor coming in with a term sheet or whether that is, having recognition in pitch competitions and awards, or even like the survey with the physician saying, yes, we really need this. I think for me, those are the exciting things. I haven't had a big exit. So in that sense, it's hard to say, well, I built something and we sold it for millions and millions of dollars. But, that's what it's about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've had a couple exits, and I'm not, a billionaire like some people are. But even so, the most satisfying things have always been related to the people in the team for
Yeah,
me.
I can understand that. I mean, I've had some exits, but not ones that have made a ton of money. I should put it that way. I haven't had any that have gone belly up, so that's a good thing. But
Yeah, well, maybe this one will be your one. So, can we turn a little bit to you personally and away from you as a professional? And tell me where you were raised. What was it like growing up?
so I grew up in Boston. I'm first generation American. So both of my parents were born in Lithuania and came over, lived in refugee camps in Germany, and then ended up in the Boston area and met and married there. So, I grew up not speaking English until I went to kindergarten and uh, being, pushed academically, I think, in a way that many people that have immigrant and refugee families have been. Um, but my grandfather on my mother's side, who we lived with when I was growing up, my grandparents lived in the same house for a while, um, had been a business owner in Lithuania. He'd been actually a quite successful entrepreneur and had started a fairly good sized linen business that is still operating. We had a chance last summer. I went back with my mother and we actually visited the factory and really what he built. I mean, there's no ownership anymore, taken by the communists, and but it's still around. So I think that having that family kind of knowledge that you can do this and having him sort of start that, back to one of your earlier questions, probably did influence that belief that I could take the leap as well, because I was close to my grandfather. And, he saw a need and decided to make it happen. So,
Yeah. And so, what from that relationship, what from that experience growing up has influenced your professional career and, in particular, your experience as a CEO and a business owner? What do you bring from that to your day to day work?
I think that you have to have resilience and belief that you can make things happen. And not to say that you don't. I mean, of course, you need to evaluate the risk, but there has to be a certain amount of confidence and, um, you know, just resilience. I remember the thing my grandfather would always say growing up, and he had the experience of he built a very successful business and then had to leave everything, fleeing Lithuania, and coming to the U.S. and having to be a blue collar work. I mean, he was working at a factory because he was in his 50s and needed to make money. But the thing he would always say is that that nobody can take away what's in your heart and in your mind. So those, people can take away material things that you own. They can take away your home. They can take away your business, but they can't take away kind of what's in your brain. And he was not highly educated, but he was super smart, but he really valued education. And then what's in your heart and the people that you love and those connections. So I think having the resilience to say, okay, I can hold on to those two things, and those can help me kind of navigate the rest of it, and having some amount of confidence to just go ahead and do it. I mean, I have a name that nobody can pronounce, and I didn't speak English starting off from school. So you have to decide who you are and have the confidence to go forward. And my mom was always very instrumental, and my father. I'd always had a very supportive family that just, went for it. My mom was the only, when she went to college, and she went to Northeastern University and did the 5-year co-op because that's how you could afford college. There was one girl in the chemistry department, that was my mother, and there was one girl in the math department who was her friend from high school who was also Lithuanian. So the two of them decided that it was all men, that the two of them my mother transferred from chemistry to math so that she'd at least have a friend. And the two of them just said, okay, we're going to do this as math majors. And, what's your problem with that?
Yeah.
They talked their high school into teaching physics because they didn't think girls should learn physics and they thought that was ridiculous. So the Lithuanian girls got together and pushed to have physics and chemistry and be able to study it. That was, I think, the culture I grew up in was very even towards women and men and, sort of a Nordic type of culture. So I never felt those barriers quite so much. It was more like somebody has a problem. That's their problem. Life's too short. I'm just going to go do what I need to do.
Yeah. Well, I can see you didn't fall far from that tree.
Yeah. That's
right.
Yeah.
That's terrific. I know as a CEO, you're busy. You've got a lot on your plate, a lot to do. What are some of the daily rituals you have that contribute to your ability to balance that busy life and be successful?
One thing that we've that I've always just sort of ground to. I don't have any kids at home anymore, but I raised 4 children, so I have a big family. But I still do this with my husband. So we are very into having a meal together and sitting down every day. And usually I cook, but it's often repurposed leftovers or you kind of order out and work around it. So, it's not a made from scratch meal every night, but it is a sit down family meal. And I think raising my kids, that was really important. And you are really busy as CEO and you're growing things. But I think having that commitment that we always sat down, and sometimes it would be a 5:30 dinner and sometimes it would be an 8:30 dinner because of the kids' schedules and our schedules. And if it was a 5:30 dinner, it usually meant the kids were doing homework and I was doing homework. And that's what they would say. Okay, mom's doing her homework. So I'd be at my computer, doing all of the additional things that needed to get done while they were doing their homework. And now it's easier because the kids are grown and out. But my husband and I still very much like have a meal every day, share what's going on. He also has a business he's growing, a separate business from mine. So, we try not to talk about work all the time, but still having that time. And then exercise is really important. And I'm not nearly as good on that as a daily ritual as many women as I know, but I do try to be really mindful of being able to get that, because when I don't, at least like go for walks, even if it's not as intense as in a way I'd like it to be, I just think it keeps me sane. So it's really important, especially getting outdoors, getting some sun, having some breaks.
Yeah, getting that fresh air.
I'm Catholic. We go to church every Sunday. Having that time to pray and be grounded is really an important value to me as well.
Yeah, grounded is a word that I would use to describe you based on what you've just told us. In many ways, not just going to church and praying and being grounded, but in spending time with your family and the things that charge you up. I think that's terrific. So there's my last question, and it is, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs? What lessons would you like to help them avoid learning the hard way?
My hardest things often have come from outside, and sometimes you can't you can't predict it necessarily, and things happen. So I think about FemPartners, the big outside forces, some of the competing much bigger companies, MedPartners, Vicor went bankrupt, and all of a sudden investors really sour on the space. And that has nothing to do with you or your performance. It just is. For Vapogenix, the big thing that happened, and you would think it would be a positive, but the opioid crisis. Now, we were in the pain space and we were not opioid. So initially I thought, oh, this is going to be a real opportunity for us. However, what happens is that pharma drives the exits and the interest. Pharma was all into opioids, and everybody with a pain franchise either went bankrupt like Purdue, or they shut down their franchise and they were getting sued by every attorney general in the country. And therefore they said, we are out of pain. We're not doing anything in pain. That really hurts early stage pain companies because that's who the exit ends up being. So I think that a lot of times those big things, if you're a young entrepreneur, try to predict as many as you can, but sometimes you can't predict it. And then the lesson is resilience, because what are you going to do when that happens? And you may not know what it is. It might be COVID for many people. It wasn't for us because we were earlier stage, where all of a sudden this big macro event comes, might be tariffs that just affect your business. It's going on for a lot of companies right now that they couldn't see it coming, didn't see it coming. And all you can really do is, I think, have the resilience to kind of focus in and keep preserving your cash. Don't overspend your cash, because that's the one you can't fix when you're out of cash. If that means you can't go as fast and you have to scale your plans down a bit to meet your cash, that's what you're going to have to do, because that's probably the risk that you can't mitigate. If at some point you can't make payroll, you're done.
Yeah.
So, do everything to preserve your cash and be as resilient towards those big outside things that screw you up that you couldn't have predicted.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Never try to raise money or find money when you really need money desperately.
Yeah, that's very true.
Danguole, thanks so much. This is the Growth Plus Exit podcast, and I'm talking to Danguole Altman, a serial entrepreneur, currently the CEO of CX Precision Medicine. Thanks so much for being with us, Danguole. Any final thoughts?
No, thank you very much. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Newport. So I really appreciate this opportunity.
It's been really inspiring to talk to you, and I can't wait to follow CX Precision and see what you guys do in the future. I wish you every success. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, sponsored by Newport, a unique national business advisory firm. If you enjoyed this show, be sure to share, like, and subscribe for future episodes.